Thank you for allowing me at your homes for this second episode of Season 4 of Esoteric Science Roundtable. And hopefully folks are finding us on the new channel, Channel 11, our new home, same time, and obviously we're on Thursdays. Let's see. I want to first thank everyone that came out to the metaphysical philosophical meetings that we here at Esoteric Science Roundtable and the fine folks over at Therefore I Am, Jeff Contreras and crew, co-host each and every third Wednesday. And so I do want to thank everyone that came out. We did have a smaller than usual crowd, I think perhaps due to the baseball game, perhaps. And also, Jeff did make it. So if you're watching, Jeff, hope you guys everything's cool, and talk to you guys soon as well. This season, obviously things have changed and people are swapped around to different channels and what have you. And I just want to say how sorely missed up to this point Chris Afanis' Reality Expander show has been for me personally, as well as George Humphrey, Common Sense. Missing you guys, and I hope you guys will be getting down here real quick like. And I also am missing my producer's gig on Reality Expander too. I hope to take the helm back doing that gig pretty quick here in the near future also. Let's see, okay, today I would like to discuss the topic reality. And certainly reality is a relative term, and as to what any single person would choose to term reality is going to differ from person to person. So, for instance, the idea of something that is subjective versus objective comes into mind as to what an individual person considers when they view an object, as opposed to what is generally conceded among the masses or the public. For instance, if somebody is viewing a car, looking at a car, and you have a person looking at it, they may perceive of that car as a certain color, and they may say it's aquamarine or something like that. And then if a crowd of people gets together, they may all get together and perceive otherwise, and they may concede that, oh, well, it looks more like a turquoise color or something along that line. And so that's just one example of a perception that ties to a person's view of what is or is not reality. And so again, that would be considered a relative term as far as trying to discern what is and what is not, and what is real and what is unreal. And I want to bring up, starting one example, since I was mentioning the baseball playoffs just a second ago. One example would be the idea of the curse of the Bambino, which some may be familiar with. And also, the Houston Astros are playing the Cardinals right now on another station, so I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of folks are checking that out right now. But nonetheless, the idea that there's a curse related to the Red Sox baseball team, the Boston Red Sox, and that since Babe Ruth left the team, they have not won the World Series, and they did return to the World Series several times, but have not won it since 1918. And so there's been an 86-year void for them as far as winning the World Series. And so they've had a chance to make it to the World Series. Now it's going to, the test of time we'll see, will hold to see whether or not they actually pull this off or not, or whether the curse of the Bambino will hold again. And so that certainly is going to, for people as far as how they perceive the curse, as to whether or not they perceive it as real or unreal, is another component of how perception plays into our human ideas and how we choose to consider things. And certainly this curse, if it is actually something that the people believe deeply enough in, and they consistently hold the thought that there is indeed a curse on our team and that we won't be able to win the World Series because this energy or this curse or what have you is just too strong and we can't overcome it, then I think that thought will certainly carry over and will tie in considerably to what manifests itself on the physical plane. And so in the case of the curse of the Bambino, it's certainly, if indeed that idea is held widely among the public consciousness, then it certainly would bode well for either the Cardinals or the Astros, one of which is going to make it to the World Series this evening. And then if that's the case, and they're going to breeze through, who knows? I don't know. Well, we'll see. We'll have to wait and see on that one. And also that will determine as to whether or not this curse is going to be something that'll maintain its infamousness, or whether it's going to recede into history as, oh, well, 86-year curse and the drought has ended kind of thinking. And also just to begin with, there are so many sports superstitions that you see that baseball players or football players and the coaches and the fans, they're basically rituals and again, superstitions that they're so steeped in that they find that they revisit every game, and they may feel that if I didn't do this or I didn't do that or I didn't cross myself before I did the kick or something, that I didn't make it, and that was why. And they're quite superstitious along those lines in many instances, and that's just one example to tie in along with the curse example of the perception of people, athletes, and that's not certainly just relegated to the sports arena. This is also something that is so common in all of our lives, that we may have lucky charms or mantras, invocations, different things that we choose to use that we feel will help us wade through the day and help us to get some grasp on reality and help us to kind of navigate through some uncertainty. And so again, all these things are components of reality, and as form a collective total mass consciousness perception when you total times the 6 billion people on the planet. And so that collective thinking from the masses is going to largely determine what is and what is not. And also our perceptions of ourselves and our internal inquiries and searchings and looking introspectively, and ideas of contemplation, meditation, prayer certainly come into mind. And then how we move outwardly towards our environment, how we look around at the world around us, and how we take all things in through our sensory apparatus. And in some cases, we can even begin to take in through extrasensory means and other means that might be termed psychic or things of that nature, as those patterns and those abilities demonstrate themselves in individuals and in the race in general as well. And so, again, how we choose to view not only ourselves, but our environment, how we fit into our environment, how others perceive us, and a million other myriad things that run through our minds on a daily basis, all build up collectively to form a perception and a consciousness and ultimately a reality. And I want to discuss also, in the context of this show, a movie that I saw recently, and I don't even make it to the movie theater very often. I don't think I've been in like 7 years, but I was compelled to check out a movie recently that's called What the Bleep Do We Know? And this is a very interesting movie in the respect that it has a component that has a storyline and has actors that are playing out a role and telling a story, but interspersed throughout all this, you have quantum physicists mostly, and different individuals, mostly coming from a scientific perspective, with a very metaphysical spin or slant attached or tainting their view, if you want to look at it in those terms. And also even an individual named Jay-Z Knight, who is a channeler or channelee, whatever term you choose to use, of an energy entity named Ramtha. And so whatever you choose to think of channeling and that sort of endeavor, nonetheless, this Ramtha was speaking through Jay-Z Knight, and so that was the personage that was discussing this information, tying to what do we know, what is reality, and how is reality molded and shaped and created. And so all of these speakers were very much in accord on one basic tenet or one basic key component, and that is that we do indeed create our own reality. And each individual is making and shifting and changing or staying in a static position in some cases by their very thoughts and by the very way that they choose to perceive, again, not only themselves, but how they interact with their environment and how they feel as if they are being perceived by others. Many of the things that tie in together that form how our complex makeup ties into our perception. And so certainly each person on the planet is going to have these searchings and these perceptions and these seekings and things of that nature that are going to create them and going to either, they're going to be expressions of their personality, and they may be expressions of that person's limitations, as we all are limited by our perceptions, and these things tend to confine the way in which we perceive things. And certainly that is a relative way of looking at things as well, as to who can say what is a depth of perception or what is lack of perception. That's certainly going to be subjective or up to individual decision or interpretation as well. But one key thing that one of the physicists, the quantum physicists, brought up was an idea that there can be a state achieved, and no big surprise, this guy was of Indian descent, from Asian Indian, not American Indian, and that he spoke of the term enlightenment, which is a common term that I certainly consider as a real condition or position or perception or state of awareness, state of consciousness that can actually be maintained, attained, achieved, and kept in tune with our human nature. And that as we seek to understand more so about ourselves and the world around us, and as we make these searchings and this endeavor to know, to ask and to know, and to be seekers along these lines, that we find our way back to and rediscover this condition, which is really our birthright. This is something that reflects the true nature of our soul and reflects the true essence of what we really are. And that is an enlightened, sentient individual consciousness that is part of a greater collective consciousness. And so the idea that we can reach this solid state, or this contiguous condition within all of humanity that can be a kind of a synonymous experience across the board, that is a point of achievement that would be considered like a high water mark for our humanity to attain, especially collectively, if we could maintain it as a group, that this enlightenment condition is something that can be perceived of, and I suppose and very much considered scientifically. And quantum physics is constantly changing and constantly rearranging itself to fit the adapting ideas and the evolving ideas of its constituents and its adherents. And the quantum physicists are certainly the cutting edge thinkers in the scientific field, because they're bringing in realms of the mind and the perception, and that certainly is the field in which we really largely rely on, and we're becoming much more complex mental beings in this day and age. So we find ourselves moving towards more, not in every case certainly, but that is the true nature of our evolving state, and that we are moving towards ultimately, slowly, some state of enlightenment, some state of equilibrium in a sense. And I don't want that to mean stagnant. I want that to mean a point of achievement, and then from that, a further exacerbation and further tension can mount itself, and then there can be further reaching forward from that point. But the idea of enlightenment, it would be something that could be considered a standard, or something that is firm and fixed and achievable on a consistent basis. And so a hypothesis of this could ultimately be demonstrated as recurring time and time again, given time. And certainly if we look back through examples through history, we can see examples of those that became enlightened, so-called, and we can see the modes and the methods that they chose to achieve that state. And this is, again, nothing really new. This concept has been around since mankind, really, in some form or another. And so we constantly move forward, and this state can ultimately be more widespread among humanity as the individual humans consider this something worthy of endeavor, something worthy of their searching and their efforts. And so this remains to be seen as well, as to how much, that this state can be achieved, and how much collectively, again, what the percentage of humanity would be that would choose to pursue this route and understand enlightenment. And so again, as to whether or not this can ultimately be considered scientific or not, that's going to remain to be seen ultimately, if we can demonstrate the nature of the soul scientifically and things along those lines. But the idea that the quantum physicists are considering spirituality as a component of their unfolding science, to me, is a great, great step in the right and proper direction, and is also a key indicator of our point in evolution and the quality of mind that has evolved within humanity, and the ideas that science is embracing ultimately some concept of God, spirituality, some creative component outside of our human condition. And that's very exciting, and that's right and proper, and it's high time that's been emphasized in science. And so this movie, again, it brings forward a lot of information from a lot of physicists, and they tie together ideas about the mind and how the mind ultimately shapes our reality, specifically individually. And the one best way, I suppose, that, the way in which the movie portrayed it, the main way, and one of the better ways I think as well, is that as we think, so we are. And that ties into the idea that if a person is depressed all the time and they have, for instance, self-pity, and they have the woe is me attitude, ultimately the brain will stay fixed into a pattern that accommodates that way of thinking, that emotional pattern, and that lifestyle. And so that locked in, if you retain some kind of an energy along those lines, some kind of a thought, and you keep yourself constantly in the self-pity mode or something along those lines, the brain will literally work itself to a pattern, again, that allows the chemicals and the firing, the electrical firings, and all the proper blend and mix to come together to create that condition and to keep it perpetuated within one's consciousness and perception, and ultimately the effects that it'll have on the physical body, the wearing down, the aging process that will ensue, and the destruction of the form because of a negative tone that's been taken on, a negative frequency that's been emphasized and relied upon. And so this again becomes a pattern, and this is demonstrable that the mind, the brain, and the component parts within it literally change themselves and rework and reform themselves to make these patterns permanent if the thinking persists along those lines. Now certainly if we're joyous and up-tempo and upbeat more so, then our brain consciousness will allow for that as well. And I would add quickly that an esoteric approach to life, where one is seeking for something outside of oneself, where one is seeking some form of enlightenment, expansion, consciousness changing, or just the growth of the mind nature in essence. Those that are seeking that earnestly will find that the mind relates or reacts in kind, and that it will allow for a further opening, and so that the mind can start to take advantage of its full capacity, its full spectrum. I guess it could be like a vision. Vision, as far as if a person has a vision difficulty, they're only going to be able to perceive perhaps part of the visible light spectrum. This mind expansion, if you want to use that term, allows for a greater influx of the full spectrum, and so more is apprehendable to the person that is searching along these lines. And meditation is a key component to help hone and focus the mind so that it can be that sharp tool that can be readily wielded for one's benefit. And hopefully, and in most cases when someone is along that kick of meditation and discovery, they're trying to help themselves in order to find some way to help others, in order to alleviate some suffering and try to improve the situation in their surroundings according to their understanding. And so certainly that would hopefully tie over as well, that one would be perceiving and trying to perceive at these levels in order to bring some benefit back for others. And this also ties into some ideas of physics in the sense of creating reality, and in the ideas of the observer and what is gauged to be real or not real. And the role of the observer plays a key part or component in the sense that the way that one views something is going to determine the qualities or the conditions of what is being viewed. And that is one of the key ideas that the quantum physicists are bringing forward, in the sense that instead of thinking of ideas of atomic structure and then the molecules from that, and that matter is this rigid, fixed thing with a lot of space and these particles in between and these atoms and what have you, and their little makeup parts that make things, and their specific densities, whether that be stone or bone or flesh or whatever. And so the idea is that from the older concepts of this were, again, that there was this matter composed of these constituent parts, and the atomic scale and things of that nature would tie in, that we've tried to perceive of these things in terms of elements and what have you. So as quantum physics reconsiders these concepts, more is being emphasized in the area or the respect that the observer conditions matter, and as a person or as an intellect, as a consciousness views or perceives something, it takes on its fixed form, or its solid, or I guess fixed would be the best word, its fixed form. Otherwise, all things, according to these ideas in quantum physics, are in a wave sort of motion, and they're constantly just waves. And so frequency and the combinations of frequency combine or congeal to make matter and other, the ethers or whatever other aspects that you want to consider. And so all states of matter, whether that be gas, solid, what have you, would in this model be part of a different wave formation or frequency. And so the frequency would create, by virtue of its number or what have you, its numeric value, its quantitative value, whatever that state of matter or condition of matter would be. And the idea that the quantum physicists are also bringing in is that there is, again, the role of the observer, in that the wave continues until there is a fixed, until there is an observation or perception made in, I guess, I can't say direction per se necessarily, but there's a perception is sent out, or however you want to think about it, or a conscious thought is considered, and the waves would conform or snap to accordingly. And so the energy of the thought would align or fix the waves into some particle formation. And even one of the founders of quantum physics also alleged that there really wasn't an atom to begin with. It was all just potential. And all things in creation ultimately are examples of potential. They're infinite potential in manifestation. And so that's certainly subject to some consideration as well, and some argument also as to what is potential and what is lack of potential and things of that nature. But the idea that there is no true atom, it is just, there is the wave that and the possibility for the potential to manifest according to how it's perceived and how it's acted upon by thought, by some thinking individual or entity. And I would say as well some self-conscious, because animals have capacity of thought, but I don't know, maybe that's open for some argument as well. Perhaps animals can in some way do some sort of manipulation along these lines as well. That is probably more the case, actually. Nonetheless, consciousness perceives, and waves take on a more fixed or rigid form. And so they're perceivable, and they can be agreed upon, whether that's the individual or the group. And so we can all agree there's a chair here, here's a couch, a desk, what have you. And we can agree upon more or less, you know, it's brown or it's a shade of brown or what have you. And so again, perception is molded along these lines. And so as potential is also considered, that for the atomic potential, there's no, again, there's no space that it would be fixed to. Its potential could take place anywhere. And so you could have the opportunity for this potential to manifest in many, many areas. And one other component of this is that the particles, once the wave is perceived, particles can exist in two places simultaneously. So the exact same particle would be able to exist and be recorded in some manner to demonstrate that two identical separate particles existed at two separate locations. And this ties in over to ideas of being able to transport matter from one place to another, and ideas of locale, and again, the potential for mobility that takes on a whole other characteristic once we get out of three-dimensional thinking, and once we move to again, more of this potential scenario and how that would play out. And so again, this phenomenon that all is potential, I think will continue to demonstrate itself certainly more so into the future, as more humans, more individuals start to take advantage of the mind capacity, and they're able to hone the mind by some means, whether that be meditation or otherwise, in order to start focusing in this respect. And so as people can become more conscious observers, the thoughts that are engaged upon will begin to take on much more significance, and idle thoughts and things of that nature will really recede to the background. That's not to say we're going to be, dull, just serious thinkers all the time. More so, it means that we will focus and hone our thought, and we will understand the weapon that we yield. When we think a thought, if we think a hateful thought, we can send out hate to another person, and it will affect them. They can sense it in some way. They'll be able to perceive, and different people are going to be more sensitive or receptive to that than others. Or if we send out love, it also conversely, or not conversely, but it also as well is considered and factored in also. And so whatever we emit is going to play out. It's going to send out, again, like as if it were waves of love or waves of hate, depending, whatever emotion or whatever thought, whatever form the thought takes. And so this attitude of the observer and this idea of thought is going to play a much more crucial role in the future as people choose to guard their thoughts and be a bit more cautious in their thinking and not so quick to think hateful thoughts, because not only do hateful thoughts hurt the other person to some degree, they ultimately hurt us, because it's like a boomerang effect in that respect. If we send out hate, we're going to receive back hate in an equal amount. If we send out love, we just receive back love in an equal amount. And so I leave that to you, gentle viewer, to discern which you prefer to have manifest in your experience, whether you would choose to send out hate and receive back hate, or whether you choose to send out love and receive back love. It's your decision, certainly. And I think as more critical thinking and more discernment becomes ours, we will choose more collectively love. And as a result of that, you'll see the wider perception and the wider mass consciousness and public opinion tend to shift and mold and change itself accordingly. The fixed patterns that I spoke of earlier of self-pity and things of that nature, that wherein the brain changes itself to hold that idea of self-pity and self-loathing, can also be reversed. Make no mistake about it. So nothing is fixed in that sense, and nothing is permanent if we choose to change our thought. That is the key component, and that is the real jewel within this whole program. As we choose to change our thought, we choose to change ourselves and the world around us. And as we perceive ourselves, so we are perceived by others. If we perceive ourselves, and that there's going to be various interpretations of that as well, but if we think highly of ourselves and we think we're an all right person, and we, again, project a positive attitude and stay on the good foot for the most part, we're going to receive that back, as people are going to see, okay, this person is this or this person is that. And it's going to, again, affect our environment and how people perceive of us, and just the general energy that is generated by us and sent out into our environment and then ultimately received back. So this is going to form, I think, a key component more so in the future as far as detachment and discernment. And we will begin to detach ourselves more so from our subjective observations in some respects, and from just how, a me kind of thinking. And we'll get into more a means by which we could stand detached from ourselves and imagine really that we are seeing ourselves as a whole, separate, entire, different person. And if we can just detach ourselves and imagine ourselves and consider how we are being viewed. And so if we can just step back for a second and just review, for instance, the tape of the day, if you want to use those terms in that sense, and review the actions during the day and what transpired during the day. Excuse me. And how did we react to situations? How did we treat other individuals? How were we received? What maybe perhaps might have set us off? Maybe there was some traffic incident in the morning and that really just got our goat, and we had a bad day, and it just gradually got worse from there. And these little things, these little agitators set in, and they either can get corrected, or they're just going to exacerbate and create a little, like a burr under the saddle, and it's just going to keep rubbing and rubbing and rubbing and causing problems. And so until we discern what these things are that have caused us some uncertainty or some grief, then we can't make any kind of move to change and amend that mode of thinking or that pattern that we find ourselves locked into. So that, again, is a key component of how we can collectively and individually begin to use thought and begin to move forward in a more constructive manner that will be more beneficial for more individuals. And again, the idea of love and these more inclusive concepts will begin to be more mainstream, will begin to preoccupy the thinking of men more so and more so as this becomes more important to more individuals. And they seek to search for a more inclusive attitude, a more comprehensive area of awareness. And we expand the mind nature gradually and gradually. And so again, imagine if we could just view ourselves and just as if we're a whole other person, emotionally detached, mentally detached, as if we were two separate people, and see, how am I acting during the day? Is this action something that I am pleased with? Is this action something that I feel is negative and is a drawback? And can I see, maybe bad habits or bad patterns that I'm developing or I'm locked into and I'm fixed in? Or am I going to discern and understand that, hey, I'm really being, I'm being rude to this person, or whatever may be the case, that we can, again, as a detached observer, point something out and get a grip on it, get a grasp on it, lock in and fix on it, and then change it. Consciously seek to change it. And it could be just as easy as flicking a light switch in some cases as to what triggers us to want to rework the pattern and remold and reshape ourselves, especially the way in which our thoughts manifest. And so that will proceed more so, I think, in the future as we become more aware of not only the quality and the gravity of thought, and that it is something, it has substance as opposed to just being an abstract concept, that there is a thought form, and that thought provides ultimately form. First the thought, then the subsequent form manifest. Thought form is pretty much an esoteric generated phrase that is a pretty common term used in esoteric parlance, and it really refers to the idea, again, that a thought is a thing, and that as we think, so we are. And the thought certainly is of a much more refined material or nature or framework than is the dense physical around us, but nonetheless it still has its reality. And it is much more real than is this dense physical. And that's another component of us returning to our birthright, our soul essence, and some understanding or awareness that might be termed enlightenment. And so as we return to divinity, return to a state of enlightenment, then this more inclusive aspect becomes ours. And so if we could view ourselves in that manner, we could discern much more. And if we could choose to discern, we could learn quite a bit much more about ourselves and our environment. And so what is possible or impossible is going to be relegated to our individual thoughts. If we deem of something as impossible, if we say can't, then certainly that's going to limit us, and we won't. But if we think of things as possible, if we think of things as all things are potential, as quantum physicists are telling us, then we can move towards discovering all those random and possible potentials. And we can mold and shape according to our thoughts and our will, and we can bring and create along those lines. And certainly we have, as humans, we are reflections of a larger will aspect. And so we can collectively co-create or work with a greater will if we so choose. And that state of enlightenment, or that state of absolute humanship, brings us into quite a close rapport with the will aspect of creation, with the will of the Father, if you want to choose the biblical term. And so bringing that concept in, it demonstrates how we co-create, how we mirror the creative nature of divinity, and the ideas that our creative thinking and our imaginative thinking tie us into this mind quality, this mind component. And even the idea of children and children's fantasies. Far too often, children have a creative, fertile imagination, and they may see fairies, or they may have an imaginary friend, or any number of things along those lines that they deem of perhaps as real. It's difficult to say if we can't get into their actual perception and their heads, so to speak. And so oftentimes we see children embracing very fanciful, in our minds, in some cases, concepts or entertaining pretty wild ideas, and again, using the creative imagination in a really non-limited manner. And again, so much is possible to the young child. They haven't had the patterns fixed into the brain that limit them to a certain way of thinking. And gradually, as the child grows older, more often than not, the parents and the peers, not the peers so much, but the peers of the parents and the authority figures tend to shut down the creative imagination, and therefore directly commensurate to that, the creative and critical thinking component as well is just squashed and crushed by a result of really discouraging the creative imagination in young children. This, I think, should be reversed in short order. If not, we're going to suffer all the fruits of that terrible labor. So the creative imagination, I would really appeal to all parents out there. Please allow your children to imagine as they will, for as long as they like. If they choose to be fanciful, imaginative, Walter Mitty types far into their late adult years, so be it. I think that people, if they have that component, they are much happier, for one thing, and we have a more productive society in many respects. Maybe not as far as getting labor done and things of that nature. That's not what I mean. But as far as expansion of consciousness, and as far as just coloring our world and giving us some diversity and variety. You know, I think the eclectic people on the planet that I've met in my lifetime, they make life worth living in so many ways. The dull, vanilla, bland, same old, tends to just get on my nerves quickly, and I want to have change and diversity, and so that's just part of my nature. And I think that a lot of people are in the same boat as well. They want to see more than just the same old thing. They want to see as much as they can see, and they want to expand their consciousness or their awareness, and they want to take in as potential, and remember that all things are potential, and we can choose the potential that we would like to see enacted in a material fashion collectively. It's entirely up to us. And so as we choose to work collectively, and remember also from the biblical story that as two or more are gathered and agree upon something, that increases the opportunity or the odds for things to manifest themselves. Numbers do make a difference, and certainly quality of the mental endeavor is going to determine the quality of the thought form, and the quality, therefore, of the manifestation, ultimately, that we bring forward by our thoughts. So as we learn to refine our thoughts, we can create much more beautiful expressions, and we can bring into manifestation something of real and rare beauty. And I see that on the way. I see it quickly on the way. Certainly, we have to navigate through some rough waters up ahead. I don't want to kid anybody about that at all, but collectively we have the numbers that are on guard and getting ready to get into the game. And we're going to be ready to make a lot of headway in a short amount of time, I'm quite confident of, if we keep our ideas of potential open and what is real, what is unreal, what's possible, what's not possible. Don't put restraints on that. I would ask that you consider unyielding, unlimited potential, and that you can do whatever the heck you want, and not imposing on those free wills and things of that nature. But if you want to create something, you can create it. If you put the proper formula together and you put the proper intent and energy into it, it will be yours. It will be at your disposal. And so again, I would hope that we can use that creative capacity to co-create with the divine, and again, demonstrate something on the physical plane of real and rare beauty. It really is going to be up to us as to how we choose to bring this in. And so, again, thought is a thing, without question. And the more we consider and guard ourselves and guard our thoughts and don't just think carelessly and randomly about whatever, I think the more progress we will make collectively as a race. So I do want to go ahead and grab some calls. Let me see what's going on this evening. Hello, caller, you on the air?
Can I give a shout out to Scrapper Jack? Yo, dog, what's happening?
All right, Scrapper Jack, I hope you're viewing this evening and I hope you're doing well. Hello, caller, you're on the air?
Yo, my name's Joe Mama.
All right, Joe. Thanks for viewing this evening. Hope you're doing well. Let me go and grab another caller. Hello, caller, you're on the air?
Well, hello, Corey. I haven't watched your show in a long time. Been like 2 weeks, I guess.
Hmm.
Well, I have a lot to say. Well, I didn't like the fact that you changed channels.
Would you care to elaborate?
I don't really tune into Channel 11. I flipped you on right now, and you're on Channel 11. Normally you were, what, Channel 16 or 10?
10 before.
Yeah.
I haven't made the rounds to 16 yet. I did for one show, actually, last season. But yeah, I've been staying on 10 primarily. But we wanted to get into a wider viewing area, first and foremost. We're in Cedar Park now, and the feed for this channel, I feel, is a better feed than is 16 through the cable feed, and the audio, I think, perhaps is a bit better as well. So there were some reasons for that, for us making the change. I like the number 11 in a lot of ways as well.
Okay, and I challenge Mojo to a duel. This is from Matt.
Okay.
Austin Brown.
Okay, thanks for that call. I'd rather this not be like a battleground for, conflicting calls, if at all possible. Thank you guys all for viewing, though, nonetheless. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Hey, nigga, what is some poetry?
That's reality, dog.
Whoever you gonna fuck my shit?
Okay, if you guys aren't gonna be able to give me some real calls along the subject lines, then I'm gonna go ahead and speak again more so about the subject at hand. I don't know if this is because the college is back in full-fledged form or what's going on, but I'd rather get some more thoughtful insight from the callers if possible. I do want to mention one other thing as far as thought and the power of thought in a real scientific context, and that is that more and more experiments are being done in which animals, particularly monkeys and rats, are being wired and they're being plugged into, and their brain is being plugged into. Keeping in mind that the brain and the mind, two separate things. The brain is like a stereo receiver, and let's say you turn to the radio, and you go to like 90.1 or 96.3, for instance. There won't be a signal there unless something's being broadcast. So if you had a stereo receiver, and you plugged it in and you tune to some area on the dial and nobody's broadcasting, you're just going to get dead air, static, whatever. That's the quality of the brain. The brain has its electrical impulses and things going on, but unless some thought drives and pervades the brain nature, then nothing's really going on up those stairs, so to speak. And so, again, the idea of thought and mind is really truly separate from the physical brain in and of itself. And the idea that some animals and humans can be plugged into in that respect, and they can use just simply their thoughts to operate a computer or operate electronic devices, because also we are electromagnetic beings. Make no mistake about that as well, that we have an electromagnetic nature or component, and that energy fires the electrical impulses of the brain, and allows thought to play out in the brain nature, kind of like a movie theater. It's like a blank movie screen that we bring the thought into, and then we can create a movie. We can create a screenplay based around our thinking and our thought forms. And so if we want to make a scary movie, certainly we can, and the screen will, change accordingly. And then we can stay locked in that forever if we choose, through our entire lives. Or we can change the flick from time to time, and we can see something different, and we can have a bit more added to that cinematic arena, if you want to use that analogy. And so, again, the mind nature works through the brain and allows thought to actually work and actually become something and manifest itself into some activity. And so the mind and thought becomes form. And again, this idea that animals and other conscious individuals can change things with their thought. I guess that answers my other question about animals being able to change things with their thought, certainly. That this would allow for these experiments to be borne out and be repeated time and time again. And this will certainly be more explored in the future as to what arenas it takes in the the intent behind these experiments is certainly going to bear some consideration as well, because if these modes of focusing into our thought in this manner to operate, electronic devices and what have you, is not put into practice with the best ends in mind, and certainly we can be in for some trouble. So I'm not saying that this is a bad thing along those lines, but it would certainly be a good idea to go forward with some careful consideration with these experiments, so that we can again use the best intent possible when we're trying to, for instance, help some person that's paraplegic to have greater mobility or greater freedom through this means, or the manipulation of animals to experiment and determine these things. That's, again, there should be some ethical parameters, considered in that respect, and in enacting that. So again, a lot, still boils down to what is subjective versus what is objective, and what the individual person perceives and feels is reality, as opposed to what mass consciousness considers real or unreal. And I think certainly some popular misconceptions keep us very limited, such as you can't fight City Hall. I think that's, a complete ridiculous concept that needs to go the way of the dinosaurs. The ideas that, again, you can't fight City Hall, and just ideas that something is so great that we can't overcome it. And some people feel that way about it. The incoming or the imposition of a police state, for instance, maybe the imposition or the reinstatement of a draft, for instance, war in the Middle East, any number of things that might, in some person's opinions, be perceived of as just an aspect of fate or a component of fate, or just that we're doomed to incur these things. I would encourage people to kind of reconsider that thinking, that nothing in our reality is fixed and rigid along those lines. I think there are certain spiritual archetypes that we mold our world upon, and that once we discover those, we make real progress. But still, the vast majority of what we wade through and perceive on a daily basis is really largely largely illusion. Maya, glamour, those are some other terms that apply to our perception, and that we can, again, we look through rose-colored glasses, and so oftentimes we perceive that something is or isn't, and therefore we won't make an effort. If we perceive that some obstacle is too immense, we may not try to tackle it. And it's kind of the old concept of, why did you climb that huge mountain? Well, because it was there. It's like we have things that are thrown in front of us that we can either run from, we can confront, or choose to ignore, or what have you. It all boils down again to perception, individual and otherwise, and that we create and mold collectively and individually what is and what is not. And so, again, if we choose to change our thinking, we can not only change ourselves, we can change our environment. Again, if we're constantly in a state of anger, we're constantly in a state of unease or anxiety, our brain will conform to that energy, and a pattern will emerge that will keep us locked in it for as long as we choose to stay locked into it. So we can also remove ourselves if we want to. It's really up to us as to how we choose to perceive, to what degree, all these things. So again, reality is subjective in many terms, and is also subject to reorganization. So we can change around what is and what is not. And the more minds that are added to this, the more the energy is emphasized, and the more the change makes itself manifest. And so this, again, is something that would be encouraged, in my estimation, along the lines of peace, goodwill, right human relations, all the things that are based on the spiritual and divine archetypes that we are ultimately all seeking to return to, some more cognizant of it than others. Some make a definite effort to take the kingdom of heaven by force, if you will, and others just go about a more casual approach to things, as many of my callers apparently are taking this evening, carefree, laid back, and what have you. And I'm not going to knock that either, because I remember I used to be much more like that as well in a younger day. And so everything has its place in our reality and our perception, and I encourage everybody to, do their thing. That's entirely up to everybody as to how they want to expend their energies. Let me go ahead and try this once more. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Hey, Corey, what's up?
Hey, how are you?
Nothing much. Well, basically, my question's not about your topic. A little bit about it.
Go ahead.
Have you ever seen that movie, Lord of the Illusions?
Is that Clive Barker or something?
I'm not too sure, but it was a cool movie.
Well, what's the concept that you want to bring in?
Basically, what you were talking about, illusions and stuff.
Yeah, I think that actually is a Clive Barker movie. I guess I'm going to just go on that note, but I think that is a Clive Barker movie, and he definitely, I've read some of his material, he definitely tends to cover a lot of illusion and magic and things of that nature, and how, again, perception and reality are all, they're subject to interpretation. Certain people are going to feel something is real, certain people are not. And certainly certain things are going to, you're not going to be able to convey certain things to people. If you have, like, say, a spiritual experience or something that's outside of the physical that can't be agreed upon happens to you in an individual way, you can tell people about it, but they aren't always going to believe you. And these things, that's part of this expansion or this awareness or this whole game of life as well. That things are going to mean more to certain people, and certain people are going to perceive things different than others. And you might have something happen to you that you really can't readily explain, and you have it just defies your every bit of logic. And you try to explain it to people, and they just think you're crazy. So, again, that's changes from person to person as well. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Hello.
Hey, how are you?
Mojo sucks. Keep on.
Okay, thanks for that call. Appreciate that. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Hello, hey, I have like this theory that
Go ahead.
people don't seem to believe.
Okay, go ahead.
And, well, basically I'm saying that, people's thoughts, it's possible that they, like, exist somewhere in this universe. And I happen to use the Mario Brothers world as an example.
What about it?
I wasn't believed. Like, I said it's possible that if someone could think it up, then, like, a replica world could exist somewhere in the universe. What do you think about this possibility?
Well, I think that along the lines of what a lot of physicists believe, that there are multi-dimensions, and there can be, infinite numbers of you, but at different little facets of creation or different frequencies where they can all, it's not like a 3D around us, but it would be where they're all kind of, I don't want to say stacked because that gives you the idea of space and time, but they all are a component part of each other, like we're stretched out among a bunch of different experiences. And so we can be maybe we're a cop in one lifetime, maybe we're, who knows what, a teacher in another, any number of things. And so, yeah, I think that does tie in, and that does make us who and what we are, that our soul nature ties us into a larger realm or dimension. I keep doing this as if it's, again, a space thing, but again, that we can expand outward to a larger perception, and that we are more inclusive than just our dense physical, and that the other alternative universes and things of that nature certainly can be factored in, and that are probably at some level, and will someday probably be provable at some level. But I thank you for your call. Take it easy. Have a nice evening. You mentioned Super Mario. Well, I mean, as far as the idea of the Super Mario, somebody had to think about that concept and then make it, and then create that world in a computer scenario. And that's the holodeck and ideas of that, holograms and virtual reality. Certainly that's another component aspect of perception, and our creative component, and what could be deemed as illusion, reality, and what have you. That's a whole other area of discussion and endeavor that could be touched upon also in relation to this. Hello, caller, you on the air?
Hello?
Hey, how are you?
Yeah. But I was wondering, since you brought up the subject of perception.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, like, please make a second.
This has been interesting. Caller, you on the air? Sorry, say
Austin Brown.
All right, golly, man. Okay, I'd prefer people just call once per show, if at all possible. Also, hello, caller, you on the air?
Hey man, what's up?
Hey, how are you?
Hey, how do you explain deja vu, or
Certain people would
Like
describe,
it's like you almost like you're living in the Matrix or something, you know?
right. Well, I would say certain people would describe it as like a hiccup in the brain or like a little brain synapse misfire kind of thing, and that we kind of just think that we were there before or what have you. But I firmly believe in reincarnation and karma for one thing, and that would certainly be
Yeah, I'm sorry.
that would be certainly one component of it that I think we could, if we went somewhere and it seemed all too familiar to us.
It's almost like psychic but without being able to like call it out, you know what I mean?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah,
It's just a strange sense that this seems very familiar or what have you. Yeah, I had that happen to me quite often as well.
Yeah, I just want to see your views on it, but that's it, man. All right, take it
Okay,
easy.
hey, thanks. Have a nice evening. Thanks for calling. It's nice to get a serious call once in a while. Here we go. Hello, caller, you on there? Alrighty. Let me see. Let me go ahead and wrap it up a bit here and consider some other ideas. Okay. Again, the idea of enlightenment and things of that nature. That state, I think, is a constant in a sense, and that once significant numbers of humanity reach that state, we'll see a real vast shift in the consciousness of the globe and the way in which things manifest and play themselves out. I think ideas of partisan politics and a lot of the competitive things in our nature are going to kind of fall to the wayside, and we're going to be much more cooperative in our creative endeavors in the future. And we're going to seek to, uplift others instead of just accentuating our own selves and our own needs and wants, and that we'll be able to step back and discern and see a larger picture, see a more comprehensive angle on things, and we'll be able to take in more. And so as we're able to perceive of more in the numbers amass, then the change will be, in line with that. And the degree of the change will be certainly directly tied into the numbers and the degree and the intensity of the thought. And so that's going to certainly factor in as far as how that plays itself out. They're just again, I want to go ahead and get back, I guess, to the kids thing again, as far as the idea of having fantasy and the creative imagination. I really want to encourage, again, parents, if you have young children, please allow them to have their imaginary friends and their creative imagination to be as fertile as possible, because I think they'll only be better in the long run for it, and they'll only be able to bring a richer experience not only to your environment, your family environment, but to the world around them, as they're able to demonstrate, again, a wider, comprehensive focus on things, and they'll be able to bring in ideas and concepts that perhaps we didn't think of because we limit ourselves. If we don't limit our thinking and don't limit what is possible, then new discoveries, new concepts, and new ways of moving forward will demonstrate themselves within the race. And so I encourage, again, and not only children too, I don't care if you're 97 years old, please express your creative imagination to the full and allow yourself to think of the most wildest things you could possibly think of. I would also encourage you to think loving, positive thoughts if at all possible as well, and the most beneficial thinking that you can muster up as well. But if you choose to, put yourself in a place of anxiety or fear or unrest, that's certainly that's up to you as well as to whether you want to do that or not. I would hope that more people get out of the anxiety mode, the fear mentality, and the victim mentality, and get to a place where they can really look at themselves with some self-esteem, not like in a sense of cockiness or arrogance or me, but just in the sense that, we have worth, and then we all have worth. And as we determine that we all have worth, then again, we can move forward collectively. It's going to just be a matter of time until that demonstrates itself more so and more so, and I'm confident that it will, very confident. So we're not going to have a show next week. There's supposed to be a class here, and I hope that there are some people actually taking the class. That's my firm hope. I want to remind you guys about Jeff Contreras, therefore I am. I want to thank my producer, Chris, for commanding the helm of the Starship Esoterica. I want to thank you guys, Austin. Have a nice evening.